Hey, this is just a little supplemental thing. I want to explain these graphs that I have, and I want to show some symptoms that happened today and how I know exactly what's going on based on these graphs. I know it looks like a lot of noise, but really there is a story here that's very clear once you know what you're looking at. So I have three graphs here on this dashboard. We're going to focus on this middle one, duct temperatures, because this really illustrates things pretty clearly. This is 24 hours. Right now. I'm going to zoom in, but I have it zoomed out to 24 hours because what this shows is essentially the system for a while performing exactly as you want an air conditioning system to perform. So I'll briefly explain the colors and things that are going on here. Okay, so two things that are pretty important. First of all, this blue background here indicates when the thermostat is calling for cooling. It doesn't necessarily mean the system is cooling, but it means that my Nest thermostat is asking the system to run the air conditioning. So anytime it's shaded blue, the air conditioning should be on. And anytime it's not shaded blue, the air conditioning is off, or the thermostat is not asking for the air conditioning to run. So let me show you a couple things here. This is a pretty important thing, is these two orange lines. There's a solid orange line and a dotted orange line, okay? The solid orange line is showing the thermostat's measured temperature in the room, right? So when you look at the thermostat, here it would say that it's 71 degrees in the room. All right, the dotted line shows the set point for the thermostat. So it was set to 70 here earlier. It was set to 68, okay? So what this is useful for is that you can see, if I overlay the cooling background as well. All right, now this is the way a thermostat ought to work, okay? Whenever the temperature in the room is higher than the set point, then it calls for cooling, right? So this works exactly like you'd expect. It corresponds with the background. So it was cooling for a while, cooling stopped, then it got hotter in the room. This jumped up above the dotted line, cooling came back on, the blue background. Right now, of course, because of the resolution and because of the timing, it runs the cooling for a little longer and so on. It doesn't correspond exactly the moment this got back down to there that it shuts off, but it does shut off. Then it comes on again when it gets warmer. Then we set the thermostat higher, so that stopped cooling for a while. Temperature went up, cooling came back on, and so on and so forth. Right? You can see this sort of oscillating pattern. This is what you would expect. Then during the night, I guess it got cooler in the house. Took a little while to kick back on here, cooled a little bit, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's kind of normal behavior. The other thing I'm going to overlay, just one more thing on this graph, and this is the temperature of the supply, which is the name for the air coming out of the duct. All right, so this yellow line now shows you the temperature of the air that's blowing into the room. So this was the cold air that the air conditioning system makes. Of course, it doesn't make cold air, it removes heat, but same difference, right? And so this, again, when you look at all these things together, anytime it goes blue in the background, that's when cooling is on, and you can see this yellow temperature drops. So we're getting cold air blowing out of the vent, which is exactly what you would expect. And when the system shuts back off, the yellow line comes up because the vent is warm again. And then cooling starts, cold air. Warms up when cooling stops. Cooling starts, cold air. Warms up, cooling, and so on. So you get, again, this oscillating temperature. Whenever the system is cooling, we're getting cold air, and then when we're not, it gradually warms back up. Cooling comes on, shoots down like a rocket, okay? And then, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's overnight or doors open, windows open, other things in the house, but there's nothing too weird going on there. But here, now I'm going to zoom in to this morning. Sorry for having a little trouble with operating the mouse here. Okay, so this is a zoomed in view of the same thing for just the past 3 hours. I had a service call this morning. Mikey Pipes from the Pipe Doctor came over. So around 8 a.m., when he showed up, you can see what happened here. The system had not been cooling for many hours because it was set to 70, and it was 68, 69, 70 degrees in the house, so we didn't need cooling. In order for him to test the system, he said, can you turn the thermostat down? So you see the dotted line drops here. I cranked it all the way down to 65, and at that point, the cooling came on, and the cold air started coming out. So the air got colder and colder and colder. After a while, I was afraid that, as you can see, the indoor temperature was lowering. I didn't want it to hit the set point, so I turned it down even further, from 65 to 64. System continues cooling. Now look at this. Again, all this tells a story. There's a bump here. All of a sudden, the supply temperature got warmer. Why did that happen? I'll tell you exactly why that happened. During the service call, we wanted to test the capacitor. He pulled the disconnect on the condenser, and so it was no longer extracting heat, and therefore the temperature started to go back up. But you can see the background is still blue. So the thermostat still wanted to cool the house, but it couldn't because the power was unplugged to the condenser. That's what that event was. All these events show up here. Then when you plug the disconnect back in, the condenser starts running again, the air starts cooling. Then what happened here? This is a very interesting spot. The set point is still 64. The house temperature is 68. It should be cooling, but all of a sudden the blue background goes away. It's not cooling anymore, and the temperature starts to rise. Well, this, excuse me, which you'll see in the video that's posted, we had a mystery where all of a sudden, as he was putting the caps back on the service ports or whatever, the system just shut off and it went into a delay. So the Nest thermostat at this point actually went into a delay mode because I think it saw a loss of power on the 24-volt line. I don't know why that happened. There was no logical reason for that to happen, but the point is you can see it very clearly on this graph. The lack of a blue background because the Nest was not asking for cooling. So it's not blue. This is only blue when the Nest is asking for cooling. So after we waited out the delay, it clicked back on. And at that point, we were having a conversation about how that works, and he disconnected the 24-volt wire to see what would happen. And so it kicked back off again and went into a delay. So this black background, while the set point is set below the indoor temperature, and you would expect it to cool, but it isn't calling for cooling, this is characteristic of the Nest going into that delay. So I will point out when I'm explaining the system that most of the people, because people will say it's your Nest thermostat, it's randomly going on delay, that's causing all your problems. It is not causing all my problems because I can see this behavior. I would see this black background if the Nest was going into delay, and 90% of the time it's not. I've seen this once, exactly once, and maybe again this morning. So this is not what's happening most of the time. But again, the system comes back on, it's cooling. Now, take a look. This is what's happening most of the time. Look at this. It's still calling for cooling. It still has a blue background, but all of a sudden the temperature starts going up and up and up and up because the compressor's not running. Look, it's happening now. I should go outside and check on it. That was unexpected. I wanted to explain this. I wasn't expecting it to fail while I was talking about it. So we're gonna run outside and see if I catch it before it comes back on. Ah, dang it. Do you hear that? I just heard it. It just ticked back on. But I bet I can, yes, this suction line is barely cold at all. So it was off. See the bubbling in there as it's starting back up again? It just started up. Unfortunately, I was not able to catch it while it was off. But here's my point. I don't need to catch it while it's off because I have the data. I'm gonna go back to my graph. I'm gonna show you because I really want to make this clear because people are gonna suggest all kinds of things. And I have the data. So again, I was starting to show this, right? System working correctly, calling for cooling, air temperature of the supply getting colder and colder and colder. All of a sudden, with no change, still calling for cooling, temperature starts going up. This is what it looks like when the compressor's not running. The Nest is calling for cooling, it's not getting cold. That's different than this, where the background goes black because the Nest is not calling for cooling. When this happens, the thermostat is not the problem. The outdoor unit is getting 24 volts. It's getting the signal to cool. The contactor is pulled in, okay? The fan is running. The compressor is not. Thermal overload on the compressor. That's what this looks like. Now here, I didn't know this happened. I just actually at this very moment on the graph, I was like, oh, I still have the thermostat set way down. I don't need it to be set to 64. So I cranked it up to 68 or 70 or whatever, 70. And then I looked at the graph and I was like, wait a minute, oh crap, I could have caught it when it wasn't running. So that was, I texted Mike to let him know that we just missed the problem happening again. And then I set the thermostat back down, so maybe it'll happen again today. And in fact, it did. Look, it cooled for just a couple minutes, and then it started going up again. So here's where the compressor shut off again. Still calling for cooling, temperature starts to go up. And then that's when I ran outside to show you all. So really, really bizarre, but it is telling. Anytime this graph is calling for cooling and it stops cooling, that shows me that the compressor is not running. A different situation than the high pressure cutoff, which would look like this. It would have a black background instead of a blue background. Okay, I know I'm belaboring the point, but I want to make that really, really clear. Now, the other thing that's interesting, if I look down here, we can see, which one is this? Yeah, outside temperature. So it's starting to get warm. This problem only seems to happen when it's hot outside. So now that it's 80 degrees outside, we're starting to see these failures again. So quite telling. And what we'll see, I'm not going to bore you all by making, this is already a 12-minute video. I meant to make it like 2 minutes. But this is the data that I have on my system. And what I see over and over again on the hot days is exactly this behavior. It's cooling for a while, and then the temperature rises. And then normally this doesn't happen because I don't mess with the thermostat. Just after a while, it'll reset on its own, I guess, because the thermal, cools down and the thermal overload resets, and then it starts to cool again a little bit, and then it goes off again, then it cools a little bit, then it goes off again. And meanwhile, I see my delta T graphs up here, which shows me how much cooling I'm getting, normally around 13, 14 degrees. Throughout those hot days, I get less and less and less until I'm only cooling like 4, 5, or 6 degrees. So that is exactly what I'm seeing, and it's starting again today. And of course, this damn system waited until 5 minutes after Mikey Pipes left for it to start malfunctioning. And that is my rant for now. I'm going to keep my eye on it, but that's all. See you next time.